Hello everyone, welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith. This in front of you is Triplock, and we are beginning our playthrough right now of the station solo kind of campaign, and it's called Room Number 1 is the one we're working on. We read this in the last video, so if you weren't able to check that out, we'll just jump back to the video prior to this, and you'll be able to get kind of caught up on where we're at in this run through of Triplock. We are not doing the challenge mode, as that's even more difficult. We'll just stick with the regular room rules. And I'll walk through the rules of the game as we start here. I think this is a great place to talk about it as we move through. So, one thing to keep in mind here is the goal of this is to solve this lock before the room wins. We only have to solve this particular lock. And as you can see, it's a combo lock. It means we need to do it left to right, which means these three symbols, or mechanisms I should say, need to be in the three visible areas, and they need to be in a row when we decide to attempt to solve a lock, essentially. So what we attempt to solve a lock is we're going to attempt to basically flip these over and take a look and make sure that the three different mechanism symbols that are showing are the ones that we indeed think are there. We have to call them out one by one. They have to be there, and then we win. Otherwise, we lose, and there's bad things that happen, repercussions from that. Involving the fact we're supposed to have 6 characters try to go through this whole station, which is 4 rooms in total. So we're going to get to the gameplay right now, and we'll kind of figure out what we can do and what we can't do. So on your turn, or at least before your turn begins with this particular room, the room actually activates first. It says room goes first, and on room's turn, rotate all 4 mechanism stacks. Next, remove the failsafe from the hidden one. The hidden area is right here. So first we're going to rotate all the stacks. So the stacks are going to kind of move all the way down the table like so. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to remove the failsafe from this one here. So now we've got a spring. We know a spring is sitting in the hidden area. A spring correlates over to a gear. So now we know there's a gear on the other side of this spring chip, and it happens to be one of the ones we need to be in the far left corner. So we need this one to be here and flipped upside down. So we're going to have to remember that and work our way towards ensuring that. And it says there's other things that you'll go through and do if there's no failsafe on top during its turn. And as of right now, we've done what we need to do to finish the room's turn. But if we had moved one into this space like this that had no failsafe on top, you have to flip the stack over and then remove the other failsafe. The room wins if you move essentially a yellow chip into the hidden area and there's no failsafe on it. Then it means that, if there's no failsafe that can be removed, or if you fail your attempt in solving this lock, the room wins. So it's pretty crazy because you have to, because there are no cards here, no diagrams in play, you only have one shot to solve this, and if you fail it, you lose, or if the yellow chip ends up in the hidden mechanism area and there's no fail safes to discard from it in any way, then you lose. That's pretty nasty. All right, so now we've done the room's turn. We'll move to our turn. Our turn involves 3 different things we can do. One of those things is to use this skill bead, which we know from the other video is to put on Axe and use his special ability to move something from the hidden area to a visible area. You can swap it, which is something you normally can't do. You normally only can swap mechanisms from the visible areas. You can't go ahead and swap out something from the hidden area, but his ability allows you to do so if you put the bead on it. Or we can put a bead at the beginning of the action +1, and by the second turn we'll get an extra action, or we can go for the points. But points are useless in this situation because the goal is just to unlock these 3, or to get these 3 from left to right. So points aren't going to come into effect really in this first room, but you'll see how they come into effect in room number 2. So we'll go ahead and we're going to keep our skill bead to the side for now. The second thing you can do is to roll your action dice and go ahead and gives you some actions that you can do to manipulate the lock. Third thing you can do is try to solve the lock. We don't want to do that now because if I flipped it over and tried to guess, I'd probably fail and then I'd lose the room. So let's go ahead with the actions, and see what we get in terms of a dice roll. We got 2 things, and this says right here, flip any 2 visible mechanism stacks. Now, what's nasty about this is we don't know what's under any of these right now, so flipping them is kind of useless. We can't flip the one in the hidden area, so that's bad. So really, when something like this happens, you get 2 dice that are the same, and they end up landing on actions that you don't want to use. You are allowed to discard both of those dice in order to pick one of the actions and use it as you see fit. The only downside being you only get to do one thing. You're discarding 2 dice or 2 actions, almost like a 2-for-1 kind of thing. So I could do something like this, like peek at any 2 mechanisms in their failsafe. That to me makes more sense because it allows me to kind of check underneath the mechanisms to see what type of symbols we've got inside of these. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to discard my 2 dice and change it to peak in 82. And you're checking not only the mechanisms but the fail-safes as well. So you essentially peek like this. You can see the fail-safe symbol. It doesn't matter as much in this room, but maybe in other future rooms. The one down here is what matters, and that right there, guys, is the keypad, or is it a keypad? Is that what it's called? No, it's code, sorry. Code as in the reference code. The awesome thing about that is it's in the exact right spot we need it to be. Essentially in order to solve this, we need this right here because it needs to be left to right, but it's good because it's here and maybe in the next couple rounds we can get it to here. It doesn't need to be flipped or anything, but we have to remember that it's there. So the code is there. And then this one, what is this? Oh, the padlock. Okay, so we've got, that's good. So we've got them facing the right way up. So we're not gonna have to flip those at all, which is good news. But the downside is I guess the real big downside of that is that the padlock essentially is it needs to be on the other side of the code. So we need to essentially get this thing to the other side of it. So we're gonna have to hope that in a future round here, we're able to flip this to the opposite side, which we should be able to do if we get a good dice roll. We'll be able to flip some things. So that's essentially it. That's all I can do on my turn. I have my skill bead, so I could do something else here. The spring makes me think about things because we know we need this spring to be in the gear position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something a little bit sketchy. So we need so if this, on the next turn, this one here is going to rotate to here, and then these two are here, and they move down. And then if we can flip them, we can solve this. Oh man, if we get some really lucky movement here, we might be able to get this done right. Yikes. Okay, this is going to be sketchy. We may be able to pull this off really quick, or it may not work out at all. For my skill bead, I'm going to choose to do an extra action this time. So I'm going to put it on the action space. On the second turn, I can move it to +1, and I immediately, +1 means you get a third dice to roll essentially from these two. So instead of rolling 2, you roll 3, which is even better. And you can do that before or after you roll them, which is awesome. So I'm going to put it here. It'll kind of help me out next. So that's it. That's the end of my turn. I'm obviously not going to try to solve this because if I do, I'll fail. So next what we're going to do is rotate things. So the room activates and rotates the chip piles around. So we know these guys all move down like this. So we do know that these two need to be flipped around. This is the padlock and the code need to be rotated in order for us to be successful. And this one needs to be flipped completely, and then technically we would have all 3 exactly where we need them. The room gets to activate still after its forward move there. It gets to take the fail-safe off of this and discards it. So now we have this here. That's fine because this is the one we don't care about. We don't need it for this lock. So everything's in the right spot. Now it is back to my turn. And I can either choose right away to bump this up to give me an extra action, or I can just wait. I can actually roll these dice first and then bump this up and get that extra dice. So we'll roll these 2 dice first to see what we get, and hopefully we get something useful. This one says, oh, cool. So this one says flip any 2 visible mechanism stacks. So what's really good about this is it's exactly what we need for this guy. So I'll be able to flip this. Now, one note I'll make on this one here, Chip Theory Games has told me that this will change or be edited to say flip any 1 visible mechanism stack. I think they're going to be updating that. So as of right now, I can play it either way because it's written as 2 visible, but they're making an edit to make it 1, to make it more the game more balanced. So essentially I can flip this, which is a spring, and the spring on the opposite side is a gear, which would give me the gear, and then it would be, I need padlock and code, and as of right now, these guys are backwards. I need to flip them around. What this one does here is it says reveal, conceal, or alter any diagram. So this doesn't really help me right now. Reason being is because, you know what, guys? This is amazing. This worked out really, really, really good. And I'll tell you why it worked out really good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this one, and I'm going to use this ability to flip any 2 visible mechanism stacks, but we know based on what I've just mentioned, it being 1, I can flip I can just choose 1 to flip as well. So I'm going to flip this one because we know we want it to be on the gear side. So now we know there's a gear there, so that's great. We know these 2 are out of order. They just need to be reversed in position, and then we're good. Now, the thing is I've used 1 dice, so I have 1 here, right? Well, this one's useless because it's a reveal, conceal, or alter any diagrams. That comes from this deck right here. And just so you guys are aware, I literally just remembered, and this is okay for this room particularly, and I'll mention this in the comments below, but I totally forgot at the very beginning of every single game of Triplock, you always get a diagram. And I've never shown you these cards, and I totally forgot to. But in this particular one, what happens is just for the sake of that mistake on my part, this gets pulled at the very, very beginning, and you get this. And I know you guys have never seen this, so let's talk about it really quick. When you get this card, essentially you're supposed to choose which of these 4 different ones you want to go for, and whichever one's on top is the one you're basically locking in. When you're playing solo, it doesn't matter if you leave the card face up, because you're the only one looking. But if you're playing 2-player, like against somebody, you'd pick whichever one you're going for, whether it's a 2-point lock, a combo lock, a 5-point trip lock, 1 trip lock. You pick whichever one you want and then you flip it. But you always make sure that the top edge is kind of where you have selected that, so that essentially when you flip it over, that's the one you're choosing. Now, the reason that this doesn't matter as much, these diagrams for this particular room, is because they all result in points, as you can see all the way around. Whichever one you pick out of the 4 gives you points, but we don't need points to win this room. We will in a future room, so that's the only reason that this mistake I made by not giving myself this earlier doesn't affect gameplay at all. It's nice to have it here because sometimes they have different effects and they might actually be able to help us move things around on the mat. So there are cards and diagrams that could still aid me, but most of this stuff is like drawing a new diagram or collecting points, and those for me right now I do not need. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick this one, the 2.1. I'll leave it face up, but we'll leave that there for now. Getting back to my actual turn in terms of actions, I had gone ahead and I had rolled 2 dice. I'd gotten this. I chose to rotate this stack right here. So one of the dice is exhausted, now unused. This one's completely useless to me because reveal, conceal, or alter any diagram would be talking about this, meaning I can reveal, conceal, or alter, meaning when you're playing 2-player, you can choose to conceal a diagram that maybe one of the guys had opened up and maybe he had gotten that and he had revealed it, and then you want to conceal it and stuff like that. Or you can alter it, meaning like you had it at this, but you'd rather have it at this now. This one here doesn't really matter too much for me right now, and it focuses more so on 2-player play. It doesn't really add anything for me solo at the moment, might later in a different room. But I'm just going to mention it from the fact that I don't need it. So the funny thing is I need to discard 2 dice in order to pick any of the actions here. The problem is I already used this one to flip. The great news is I used the skill bead right here on the action from the prior round, which means I can decide to up my actions an additional one, giving me access to another die. Meaning, regardless, so I can roll this, and even if I don't get what I want, I can discard both dice because I haven't used either to get the action I choose. That's what's really cool about it. The other thing, just so you guys are aware, if I decided right now that I wanted to use Axe's skill, even though I put the bead here, I can easily move it over to here and drop it here. It's just I lose all of this, whatever I've built in this particular skill set based on the rounds I've used it in. So if I was like halfway through, 2 turns later, I was at this second points node and I decided to use Axe, if I put it here, used it, the bead comes off, I can't just put it back here later. You have to start from scratch. So anyway, what I'm going to do is obviously bump up and get that extra action, allowing me to re-roll another dice. It's going to give me another flip. This one is flip any 2 visible mechanism stacks. I don't want that. What I wanted was swap any 2 visible mechanism stacks. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to choose to swap any 2. So when I swap any 2 visible mechanism stacks, essentially goes like this, ba-boom, ba-boom. And as of right now, I should have all 3 in the exact order of this lock. And if I don't, I lose. So what I'm going to do is my final action. My final, I guess action's not a good way to say it because actions come from the dice. I want to make sure I clarify that because otherwise things will get confusing. But essentially what they call it in the rule book is on your turn you have the chance to do up to 3 things. I don't know if they'll change that word later, but they use the word things. So they consider actions to be a thing. In other words, rolling dice. They considered using the skill dice a thing, and they considered using trying to solve a lock a thing. And that's what I'm going to do right now is try to solve the lock. That's the third thing I'm going to do because I've already done the skill, the dice, And now we're moving into solving. So I'm going to try to complete a diagram, which is complete this combo lock right here. It has to be, when I reveal this now, it's either a win or lose scenario. I have to have a gear, a padlock, and a code. So let's reveal these and see how I did. Gear, we're good. Padlock, we're good. Code, we're good. So guys, we did it. We had solved this lock. So that means that this station room has been completely solved, and now what I can do is continue on with Axe. In the next room, we'll move into an even tougher scenario. So this is kind of like to just get your appetite wet. It's showing only some of the very easier mechanics, but I can tell you when you move into room 2, it starts asking you to get points, meaning that you need to use these diagram cards as well as solving kind of a master lock combo here. Gets really, really interesting. So I'm hoping you guys are enjoying the playthrough. I want you to know that the gameplay continues to kind of get more and more involved as you play more and more rooms. So don't think that this particular room right here is the gameplay of Triplock. I might have made it seem simple because I might have just got lucky with the way things were laid out, but I can tell you right now, in room number 2, it's going to get tough, and I likely will probably fail it. I've tried to play it once already. I think I've failed it 2 or 3 times already, so it gets much, much tougher. So we're going to play it through together, see how I do. Hope you guys are enjoying it. If you have any questions about anything you saw, let me know in the comments below, and I do, again, apologize for not pulling that diagram at the very beginning like I should have, but again, it didn't affect gameplay in this particular case. The other thing that I didn't do, which probably should have, is the points reference card wasn't necessarily needed in this because, again, we weren't gaining any points, but the round token here, I should have bumped this up to 2. So that should have just been at 2, but we knew we were on the second round based on how many times we were rotating things. So everything's been covered, and we'll be moving and reading into station room number 2 here in order to get ready for the next video. So I'm going to put this card aside. We're going to read the story, and we'll get ready for this next room. All right, here we go. The satisfying sound of locks releasing indicated success. Immediately, a rusty door panel began to slide open, causing Charlie to jump sideways to avoid falling in. "Follow me," was all they heard as the ornate silver mask disappeared from view down a steel ladder. "Lead the way, stranger," Elliot replied, carefully setting foot on the metal rungs. Others were less trusting, but no one could resist the mystery, and soon they were all down the ladder into a room full of motion. Gears spun everywhere and steam filled the air, making the room feel alive. A control box on the wall to their left held a complex lock. "This room has a mind of its own," the stranger remarked. "It's a single massive machine built entirely to analyze and shut down attempts to bypass its defenses. Who wants a shot at this one?" So one thing I'll mention before I flip this card over, guys, is just to let you know, this one we just did, the room station 1, or the station room 1, sorry, it does have a challenge mode on the bottom. So you'll notice that we played this one, which was the regular kind of difficulty. Challenge mode says, you know, you can basically replay this again later, and it gets much more difficult. So you can make this room 1 a step up, a little bit more difficult, and I mentioned this in the last video, but essentially it creates a stack of your 4 that cannot be disarmed, peeked at, flipped, or swapped. And you'll see, we already know what peeking at is because we looked at, you know, flipping the mechanism or lifting the mechanism up and looking underneath. We've done flipped and we've done swapped. We haven't done disarmed yet. Disarmed will come into play later. Disarmed is when I choose, based on getting this die roll here for this face, to disarm any visible failsafe, and I get to take the failsafe and it ends up sitting in my play area, not going off to the kind of discard pile or whatnot. However, we may or may not see that in the room number 2 we're currently going into, because this particular room has an interesting little dynamic for its room rules we'll get into right now. So you'll see the goal for room number 2 is a little tougher. Earn 5 points, and we have to get points from diagram cards, which means we need to get another master, another big lock unlock, or potentially pick away at it with multiple diagram cards. And then it says solve this lock in 8 rounds or fewer, or the room wins. So I guess in the last video when I mentioned that you needed 8 rounds to solve the room number 1, that was probably incorrect. But regardless, you lose whether in the room number 1 if you messed up on your you're checking of the lock to see if you're right, or if that mechanism had a yellow chip went into the hidden area and didn't have failsafe to get rid of, you lose. Those were the two kind of ways to lose. In this one, you got to earn 5 points and then solve this lock in 8 rounds or fewer. So you have a timer on you. If you fail in this one, what happens is you lose your diagram that you're currently going after. So for instance, if you were trying to get 5 points off this one, you'd have it tilted like this. And you said, I think it's code, gear, and this one is the pull mechanism here. And all of a sudden this one ended up being the push instead. You'd fail, you lose your turn for that round. This card gets discarded and you keep going from there. So essentially you just kind of screwed yourself a little bit and time continues moving on. So in this one we need 5 points, which we'll try to be getting from these cards, diagram cards here. Then we need to, on top of it, solve this lock here, a spring, this is a push, and this is a lever. And the room rules in this one are a little different. It says normal setup is normal, but room goes second this time, so they go second. All disarmed failsafes must be placed on this card rather than gaining them yourself. And that's what I just explained, where normally if you get that die roll here, the mechanism will come off the stack and go into your play area. But this particular card, it takes that failsafe and ends up going and sitting on this card. The reason that happens is it'll explain it here as well. On the room's turn, all 4 mechanisms stacks rotate. So again, similar to the last room, they'll all rotate around. And it says anytime a mechanism's failsafe is removed, so that means when I go ahead and remove a failsafe, using the disarm function here on the reference or on the action die, what's going to end up happening is things are going to get a little bit more nasty for me. So it says anytime mechanism failsafe is removed, flip this mechanism stack. If this new mechanism does not have a failsafe, you add one from this card. I know this might sound really confusing on video. I'll show you how it plays in true action in the next video. It's very, very cool mechanic where once the failsafe, that if I decided, and all this is going to get washed away again because we won, so all these will come off anyway. But just so you know, if we had a stack here, just hypothetically, and it was sitting here, and I'd gone ahead and disarmed this because I got in a roll that had that die, and I decided to disarm this one, this, instead of showing up in my player area, would actually end up going onto the room station card number 2. So I would put it right here. And then it says, anytime a mechanism failsafe is removed, flip the mechanism stack. And if this new mechanism does not have a failsafe, add one. So what would end up happening is, I disarm the lock now, or the room activates, it flips it over like so. And because there's a mechanism on top, nothing else happens. However, if it was like this, and let me see, if this new mechanism does not have a failsafe, add one from this card. Oh, okay, sorry. So if it's running around the map and it's like this because there's no mechanisms on either side, then essentially the mechanisms that pile up on this card actually come back on top. Meaning that it's like slowing your progress, and it's also trying to mess with your memory to try to remember these things as they change. So it gets really interesting. I'll show you how it all plays out. It sounds very confusing to try and explain without too much visual representation, but I will do my best in the next video to show you how that works, to show you that this game is not easy, and it is difficult to remember these things. You think it would be easy, but when you're sitting here doing it, this second room is going to give us some trouble. So hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks again for watching. If you haven't subscribed to the channel and want to, that'd be awesome. Join the solo community that's growing every day. And really enjoying this game. Hope you guys are too. And again, check it out on Kickstarter. The link will be below in the description. Until next time, keep on rolling solo.